Dave Aranda and the Baylor Bears already have the cheat code to get into next year's college football playoff. Let's get Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. Appreciate you guys going out of your way and making this your first listen today and every day, whether it's on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. On today's show, we're looking at the secret sauce that Baylor has to get into next year's CFP. It's already been staring us in the face. Plus, what Scott Drew needs to change immediately about this team so that the Bears can start moving forward and solidifying their place in the NCAA tournament. Or do they already have a spot in the NCAA tournament? Field of 68 put out its first bracketology. Let's take a look at if and or where the Bears fall in that field. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. National championship over. Congratulations. Abound. It's now time to start looking towards the 2025 CFP. The CFP that starts in 2025 and gets into 2026. Like, we're done with this past year. It's over. Put it to bed. We're all looking towards next year. And one thing that struck me the last 2 years in the CFP, which, it's not a stunning thing. I'm not going to be the first one to point this out, but just how much it slaps you in the face with it. Last year, national championship game, Michigan, Washington, the Indiana Bowl. Both the starting quarterbacks were not only portal quarterbacks, but they both started their careers at the University of Indiana. Last night, Notre Dame, Ohio State, both transfer quarterbacks. Riley Leonard from Duke and Will Howard, of course, Big 12 guy from Kansas State. So I went to look deeper because I know last year, the 4-team playoff, 3 of those 4 guys were transfer portal quarterbacks. Add in Quinn Ewers to that, who's also in the field this year. And when you get to this year, you find that half the field was transfer portal guys. Will Howard, Riley Leonard, Quinn Ewers, Sam Leavitt, Curtis Rourke, and Dylan Gabriel. So you want a seat at the table here, you should probably bring your quarterback in through the transfer portal. Am I wrong? And it's not just the big boys out there like the Ohio States and the Notre Dames. Obviously Baylor put out this apparent $6 million bid for Will Howard. He ends up going to Ohio State instead. Not a bad investment. It's not just those guys. Curtis Rourke at Indiana, coming from what? Ohio? Is that right? That could be right. And elevates a program to a place it's never been before. Indiana's never been that good, nearly that good. To think about the playoffs. Playoffs? Indiana? Not in this sport, until a transfer portal quarterback came in there. And it's not just plucky teams like that. It's also within our own conference. Sam Leavitt, Michigan State Spartan, out here leading Arizona State to the Big 12 championship and therefore the CFP. Everywhere you look, it was just matchups of transfers versus transfer, Leonard versus Rourke, Ewers versus Leavitt, Howard versus Leonard. Everywhere you look, Howard versus Gabriel. They're coming from the Big 12. They're going to the Big 12. They're going all over the place. The secret to getting there, among several others, I'm sure, is having a transfer portal quarterback. Because even those best teams needed to do that. Right? Michigan can go out and get whomever they want. They did it this year. They stole a guy at the 11th hour, just threw him a blank check from Dave Portnoy. And Bryce Underwood might well get them there. But the guy who already finished the job for them, they got from Indiana. Riley Leonard, they get him from Duke. Notre Dame, they can go get anybody with their prestige. Ohio State's got the prestige and the pockets. They got their guy from Kansas State. The great part about it is Baylor's already got their transfer portal quarterback. In fact, Baylor Nation, you've got 2 transfer portal quarterbacks, both from the SEC. So if we want to hold that conference into such high regard, how about stealing a couple from them? Sawyer Robertson and Walker White. Like the next 3-4 years of your football program, if all goes well, is going to be run by transfer portal quarterbacks. They've already got that. They've already checked that box. And that's a huge box when it comes to these teams in the CFP. And I know there are many of you out there, probably some of you watching this video right now, that are saying, I'm sick of this portal stuff. It's not the college football I love. I still think there's room to develop your players the way you did 5 years ago. And there is still room for that. You know, Ohio State didn't have a single portal wide receiver on their team. Notre Dame's had homegrown guys making some big plays in this college football playoff. Of course, there's still room for that. But the farther we go into the CFP era, the more we are straying away from find the prize quarterback recruit of the recruiting class, develop them, have them sit behind someone for a couple of years, hold the clipboard, wear the red hat, wear the traffic vest on the sideline, and wait his turn. Doesn't happen as much anymore. Whether you like that or not, that's just not the way the game is. And of course, as we've seen, there could be a mixture of both, because all those things we just described about the quarterback waiting their turn, learning under someone else, Sawyer Robertson's gone through that too. He just also went in the portal. You know, Michael Penix did that at Washington. You know, it happens all the time, but they're also coming in through the portal. Sam Levitt for a year, right? I think that's right. So right now, if you're looking at, you know, the Big 12 or looking around your own conference, if you root for another team, you look at those teams that are starting a portal guy at quarterback, they still have to be good, but it feels like there's an edge there now, right? So TCU goes out and gets Josh Hoover, and he's a pretty good quarterback. Jake Retzlaff at BYU, same thing. But the 2 best returning quarterbacks in this conference, in this order, are Sawyer Robertson and Sam Levitt, both portal guys. And the next guy Baylor's got, portal guy. The failed starter they had, portal guy. That position, more than any other, has correlated from successful portal guys, like good acumen portal guys, to successful at their next spot. Like more than wide receiver, more than linebacker, more than place kicker. Quarterback, the most important position in the game. If you want to win at this level of college football, you probably got to have a guy from the portal. Baylor's got 2. So am I saying that Baylor should be in the college football playoff next year? Yeah. Why not? A year ago with a 4-team playoff, I know how crazy that is to say that Baylor is going to be competing for a playoff spot. But now with a 12-teamer and the parity in this league in particular, it's not crazy. You would have laughed Arizona State out. They had the same record as Baylor in 2023, 3-9, picked to finish last in the conference. They're there. So why can't Baylor be? I know there'll be some SEC fans. Oh, you don't have the money. You don't get the 4-star, 5-star guys. Baylor's trash. Baylor will always be trash. It's not your game anymore. It's not your game. And it doesn't take buying 4- and 5-star guys out of high school anymore. You can go out and get your guy in the portal. You're probably going to have to pay him. But there's an avenue there to get proven commodities in through the transfer portal and develop some other positions. Baylor is already on the hot track. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Baylor rolls on because men's basketball needs some serious changes. We'll just get you started on the first one coming up after this message from FanDuel. Yes, it is FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. That's just what I call it colloquially. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets. The most I've ever had to read for a read if you win that first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make sure this playoff season is unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. We transition to the hardwood. It's not great right now for Baylor. In the next segment, we'll tell you, how bad it is right now. But as we stand here in late January, it's not great for the Bears right now. It's not great for Scott Drew's team. Worst loss of the season on Sunday against a mediocre TCU team at home. And now I'm all kinds of worried for these next couple of games. You know why I'm so worried, Baylor fans? Because they're all winnable. Kansas State at home. They're in some type of way right now. They're trying to scrounge up money to fire their coach. And then Utah on the road. Team you already beat by 25. Should be easy. And then BYU on the road. A place where it's a very tough environment, and I've got a sneaky feeling they're going to be desperate for a win. I'm just going to talk myself into worry here. I really am. And after watching that game on Sunday against TCU, when they were successful in the first half, I had one thing in mind, and I'm like, this is going to be a topic of discussion this week on Locked On. I'm going to talk about how if Baylor makes this change, they're going to start rolling again. And then the second half happened, and I jotted down about 6 changes that they need to make, and that's just the ones that I know of. But I think most of you watch that team, even those of you who know ball, which people have told me I know ball. John Jacobs has told me I know ball. In no certain terms, he's kind of said it. He's implied it. So even those of you who really watch this team and watch college basketball a ton, you watched it on Sunday and you're like, I'm kind of running out of answers here. There's a lot of issues. And the overarching thing is they're not gelling. It's just not being put together because we know there's talent here. Like, Jeremy Roach's talent doesn't just evaporate. Jaden Nunn's talent doesn't just evaporate. VJ Edgecombe his talent doesn't just go missing for most of the game. It's a cohesive thing. There are 5 players out there. They're not one team. I'll go back to a Duke thing, a Mike Krzyzewski thing for a bunch of years. 5 fingers, right? Open hand slap, it'll hurt, but it's not going to do much. It's not going to win you many fights. But if those 5 fingers, those 5 players come together and make a fist, you're going to win a lot more fights. You might knock down some weak teams with a slap, an open hand slap. 5 players, you just got more talent, you're going to beat them. But when you face the big boys, you're not beating them with a slap. You got to beat them with a punch, and you got to beat them with a good punch. You've got to come together and play well and put in that effort for 40 minutes. And Baylor does not put out an effort as a team for 40 minutes. They don't do it. I'm just calling it the way we see it. We all see it. There's not enough effort out there right now, and there's not enough cohesiveness. They're not playing as a team. And if they are, I don't know what the strategy is. See, that's the thing. I think Baylor coaches are better than this. I think there is a message, a game plan. We're not seeing it. And in the first half, when I was watching against TCU, I said, I think they've made the change that they've needed to probably all season long. And that was this. Rob Wright started the game at point guard. Jeremy Roach started as the 2 guard. And Jaden Nunn came off the bench. With all that we've seen this season, that is the personnel move that makes the most sense. Jeremy Roach, and I've said this from basically game 2 onward. the offense does not run as smoothly with Jeremy Roach running the point as it does with Rob Wright. It just doesn't do it. And the benefit is that Jeremy Roach is, excuse me, Jeremy Roach is a pretty good two guard. Okay. In fact, he had an excellent season last year for Duke as a two guard. And he comes into Baylor and he told Jeff Goodman before the season, he says, I'm the point guard. And I applauded him at the time. I said, okay, that's the kind of leadership this team needs. Someone who comes in and says, I'm going to be the guy. You guys get on my back. But the more it's gone on, the more it just feels like Jeremy Roach wants to be the point guard no matter what. And Baylor spent a lot of money to get him here. And he's not the best point guard on the team. Rob Wright's the best point guard on the team. And Rob did not have a great second half. He didn't shoot the ball all that well, but you guys see it. The offense works better. People are moving more. There's more movement to the entire offense when Rob Wright is running the show. Jaden Nunn. I said it after the first week, probably 3 or 4 games into the season. I said, this guy's going to be an all Big 12 guy this year, and he's going to be your best three-point shooter. Neither of those things are going to happen. He might become your best three-point shooter with the rest of the season, but he's not playing at an all Big 12 level, which I thought was the leap he was going to make. And I thought he was going to be a 40% three-point shooter. He's not doing that. He's not shooting with confidence. He's, again, like last year, roller coaster ride defensively. I thought he played great defense in that Arizona State game, but you know, you can count on one hand how many times you're like, man, Jaden Nunn's really impacting the game defensively. And so all that leads me to think that there's not an acceptance of roles here, specifically at that point guard spot. And it could really screw Baylor if this keeps going. Because you got to think of it this way. You know, you think about Jeremy Roach coming in and spending a ton of money to bring him in with NIL. Same thing we said about DeQuan Finn. When you invest that kind of money and you give this kid the promise, he's got to have the basketball. He's got to be the point guard. Same thing with DeQuan Finn. You paid him a ton of money. Sawyer might have looked better in camp. We don't know. But it became, DeQuan's got to be our quarterback here. Got to be our quarterback. We invested the money. And where it could hurt, or it didn't hurt football, where it could hurt basketball is Rob Wright is in a very odd no man's land right now. And that is, you know, he was a top 30 recruit, excellent high school player, best high school point guard in the nation. And he comes in here, probably not big enough to go in the NBA draft right now and go high. Probably needs another year on tape to prove to the teams that doesn't matter. But could declare for the draft and could enter the transfer portal. Like, that's got to be a concern of, hey, we need to keep this kid happy to a certain extent. And if you're Scott Drew, it's actually kind of perfect in that you need to keep him happy, and he's better at the thing that would keep him happy. He's a better point guard than Roach is right now. Roach, if you want to help this team, you want to get back to a Final Four, which is such a stretch right now, probably going to be the two guard. And you know, be that combo guard that we know you can be. Like, he's a better shooter than what he shows right now. I know he's got to get healthy. It looks like he's got another injury, which obviously we don't want, but he's got to take one for the team a little bit. And I'll give you one more Duke example because we're talking about Jeremy Roach. But college basketball fans, you'll remember about 10 years ago, Duke had an unbelievable recruiting class coming in: Jahlil Okafor, Justice Winslow, and Tyus Jones. Tyus Jones was the point guard, but they already had Quinn Cook, who had been a backup point guard and then the starting point guard the year before. And so, it was kind of this thing where, hey, we brought in the number one point guard of the country. Sound familiar? But we already have a good, solid point guard who's played a lot of games for us. Sound familiar? Quinn Cook moved to the 2 and actually set the Duke record for consecutive games with a three-pointer made. And Duke won the national championship. And Tyus Jones was the MOP of the Final Four. There's already a blueprint for what Baylor's dealing with right now. And when those guys accepted their roles and took one for the team because it was for the betterment of the team, They won the national championship, and both those guys had NBA careers. I think it's worth noting. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out the channel a ton. Again, about 75% of you watching do not subscribe. Please do. Helps out the channel. Helps me out too. Ring that notification bell to get notified on YouTube whenever dropping a video. And then wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Baylor continues this Locked On Baylor train. We're going to look at whether the Bears are a March Madness team right now. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. This message is brought to you by Prizepicks, but told through me, Cam Stewart. That's the place to get real money sports action. As you could tell, I was reading the wrong part of it. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prizepicks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or the regular season, Prizepicks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. And now it's playoff time. There's no better way to get in on the action than with Prizepicks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players. And if that pick hits, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's right, 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. And with the app, you can get your winnings fast, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. So are you ready to run your game this playoff season? Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prizepicks. Prizepicks, run your game. There's been a lot of talk this winter about the Big 12's demise when it comes to basketball. Just not what it was. Last year, a couple years ago, not nearly as good. The 16 teams, you water it down. It's all about the SEC now. That's what it's all about. Big 12, it's history. It's a football conference now. I've heard everyone say that. I've heard ESPN just bang that drum. I can't believe it. But to be fair, I do need to note that I'm part of that. I don't think the Big 12 is as good as it was last year or a few years ago. I've been open about that on this show, and I think Baylor is unfortunately contributing to that. But I guess that's not how the nation sees it and or how the metrics see it, because the Big 12, as we did in a show last week, they're still Ken Palm darlings, up and down the top 25. And there are more Big 12 teams being underrated by the AP and still more Kentucky teams, or Kentucky's one of the teams, SEC teams that are being overrated by the AP in terms of their metrics. And I love Ken Palm. I know a lot of the stat heads love Ken Palm too. And all those things get weighed. AP, Ken Palm, Evan Mia, all that when it comes to the selection Sunday and how these teams get picked. So Field of 68 has put out their initial field. And Baylor does make it. Baylor makes it. Barely, if you're talking about a Power 5 team, but they do make it as the 9 seed, taking on the Georgia Bulldogs as the 8 seed. That would be one where Big 12 pride would be on the line, because here's a good program in Baylor, a Georgia team that hasn't made the tournament in like over a decade. And I think are kind of pretenders right now. But they do have Baylor in as the 9 seed, and they've got 8 Big 12 teams. If you include the play-in, right now UCF is in a play-in spot, so they would be going to Dayton based off this. But here's where the disrespect comes in. 0 number 1 seeds. SEC's got a couple. Kansas and Iowa State, both 2 seeds. I just don't know how you've watched this season so far and look at Iowa State and say, yeah, you know what? That's not a 1 seed. No way. And if you think the top 2 teams in this conference are both 2 seeds, which, by the way, I think you can have a pretty good argument for Houston being a 2 seed right now too. So let's just say 2 seeds and the number 1 3 seed. If those are all in the same conference, how does the conference champion not get a 1 seed? That's what I'm wondering when it comes to this Field of 68. But I get it. It's January 20th as they put this out. I get it. Okay. But that doesn't make too much sense. So 8 Big 12 teams. The reports of the demise of Big 12 basketball have been greatly exaggerated because you know how many teams they had in the NCAA tournament last year? They had 8 teams, the same number. And that was the Big 12 record. 8 teams. And that's where they are right now in the field of 68. Jeff Goodman, Fanta, all those guys. They love the Big 12 again. But they also love the SEC more. They have 12 SEC teams. Let me repeat that. 12 SEC teams in the field of 68, by the field of 68. Even the Oklahoma Sooners as a play-in team. Got to count them if I'm counting UCF. So while the disrespect seems to have been lifted with the 8 Big 12 teams, it almost feels like another slap in the face that we're going to see 12 SEC teams in there. I'm trying to make heads or tails of it. St. John's is in, by the way, as a 7 seed, so maybe that is a good win for Baylor. 12 SEC teams, and none of them are Arkansas. Not one. Arkansas stinks. That win does not look great anymore. Arkansas stinks. But anyway, maybe it's not as white-knuckled as we think down the stretch for this Baylor team, although you don't get much lower than 9 when it comes to the Power 4. In fact, 11 is as bad as you get when it comes to the Power 4 teams making the NCAA tournament. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. What do they need to do to get into March Madness assuredly? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe. Listen to us in podcast form as well, wherever you get your podcast. That helps out the channel immensely. So does liking the video. So does subscribing to the channel. So you get the number one source for daily Baylor sports content. Number one. Like, let's stop playing around. This is number one. You guys made it that way. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. And we will see you later on this afternoon on your favorite program, Locked On Baylor.